Is it working? Yes, okay. I also apologize for the lack of gender balance, but I'd like to really invite every single member of the panel to comment on how the organizations are addressing the policy of ensuring maximum equality in job opportunities. Thank you for letting me be the moderator, and let me introduce the panelists one by one. Okay, fresh tagliolini, mozzarella. No, sorry, this is my shopping list at Tesco. I just got it wrong. Paul, I actually Googled Paul because I didn't know that much about him, and I found a fantastic piano piece of the Beatles, All You Need Is Love. But actually, it's another Paul Ayres. That's the only thing that he doesn't know how to do is to play piano at concert level. Paul is an amazing person. I actually wrote it down. He not only founded and set up internet companies, but he actually developed businesses into hundreds of millions of dollars of sales. Companies unknown like Netscape and Red Networks. Really an incredible experience, which I'd like him to share with us as much as possible. Paul is chairman and founder of Whisper Media Group and Fairtrade Mining. He's an evangelist, a real pioneer, and continues to be a very, very influential person in the digital media and digital world across Europe and certainly in the UK. Riccardo, I'm actually... Sorry? Apologies. Riccardo, I'm actually very curious of Riccardo to be tall. Riccardo is one of the founders, actually I don't think it's working now, okay. He's one of the founders of King Digital Entertainment, one of the most successful mobile gaming businesses worldwide. You might know it, Candy Crush, amongst other things. Riccardo has a 20 years plus experience in consulting, Boston Consulting Group, LEK, in business management in the new world, in the technology sector and e-commerce. And he's also a leading figure in the UK, particularly an advocate with the UK government to establish a tech city in the east of London. So that's Riccardo. Massimo is married with 5 children, of which 3 are in LATYMER, all with very strong credentials in the sports field, as far as I know, I'm sure also academically. Most importantly, Massimo loves boxing, football, music, and good wine. That's what he told me to say about him. He graduated with Bocconi, one of the best universities in Europe, where he's also a faculty member, which I kind of find hard to believe, but there we are. He has been 28 years in investment banking, and so he sort of represents me, in a way, the dinosaur part of the panelists today. Massimo is a partner at Goldman Sachs, where he runs activities in Italy and in Eastern Europe. Rahmyn, what can I say about Rahmyn? He's unique. You can easily recognize him by his beard. He's an exceptional guy, Mr. Get It Done, I have to say. He's both equally an incredible partner for brainstorming, but also for actually executing the development of business ideas, which is actually a key theme of tonight. It's not just having a good idea, but it's actually persevere stubbornly until you actually achieve your goals. Rahmyn is a senior partner in Accenture in a technology space. He's a trusted advisor at highest level, both in large corporates and, I'm so sorry, but also in, I think it's Rahmyn trying to boycott me, by the way. His main skill is to communicate clearly. You asked me tonight, he told me, Tomaso, please speak clearly. And he's actually very clear. I asked him, Rahmyn, what do you want me to say about you? He said, Tomaso, keep it very simple. Just say, I have to read it. I devise and implement multidimensional approaches to driving digital transformation within high-matrix international organizations. So, I hope you understand it, because I don't. Last about me, I'm not sure I can qualify as a high-tech guy. I did work in banking for some 20 years. Then I decided to become more international and techie, so I went to produce boots in Mongolia. That was not very successful. Since then, I actually was lucky enough to be co-founder of a couple of companies, one in the pharmaceutical space, radioactive pharmaceutical space. Now it's a reasonably large company producing in some 15 countries, and also a company in the outsourcing business, which in itself is not a very techy business necessarily, but it's one of the areas in the future you will see growing because of the increasing need by the state-owned organizations to outsource elements of their business to third parties. Having said this, let's move on to, sorry, what did you say? No, he's just saying that I don't qualify, but just be a moderator. Okay, first question. Please, panelists, in your answers, try to be brief and focus on really what is relevant for the students. We have to make it a specific effort in keeping the lingo simple, like Rahmyn suggested just before. The first question is, how has your industry changed in the last few years? How did you adapt, you as a person and organization, to stay ahead of the curve? And I'd like Paul to open the floor. How did you and your organization manage to adapt to the change in the industry as you have seen in the last few years?
Yeah, can you hear this okay, guys? That's a great question. I gave this thought, actually. I was lucky enough to see some of these questions before, and I was thinking, what is adapting in business? And if I look at my career has been really at the bleeding edge of technology. So I've seen the progression of data centers, which used to be at the back of organizations run by nerds and never really discussed, moved right the way forward now so that they are the front-facing part of many businesses, many government organizations, NGOs, economic organizations, finance, and so on. So I guess the thing that I've learned over the last 25 years is that the inevitability of digital is exactly that. It's inevitable. We're never going to work our way back from all of this data that exists and all of these incredible technologies that glue us all together and enable us to automate faster and faster the different business processes and the different communication channels that we as individuals experience, use as part of our everyday lives. I think the thing that concerns me most is that we forget the human element as we try and digitize too much. And so part and parcel of my interest in participating today was to talk about some of my experiences in terms of the challenges of keeping up with digital, but never forgetting that we are human. We have fundamental communication needs, and we need to interact with people, not just with screens. And I think part and parcel of, I suppose, the challenge that I face every day is how I don't spend 12 hours in front of a screen, how I spend time with staff, how I spend time with business partners, and how I make a point of not being digital half of my time.
Fair enough. Riccardo, would you like to add on to this from your perspective?
Sure. So, yeah, we started the company back in 2003 on the web, offering games on the web. Then we were disrupted because we were on the web. We were not on Facebook. Facebook was launched in 2007, but it's really started growing exponentially in 2009. We were not on Facebook. We saw 45% of our traffic on one of our leading partners, Yahoo, basically collapsing in the time frame of a year. And that's when you're not on a platform, it's like someone taking off under your feet, basically the carpet. And then it took us 2 years to crack Facebook, to bring our games to Facebook, reinventing the model. And then in 2009, we launched on mobile. Candy Crush was launched in November of 2012. And we grew from, basically we approved a budget with the board in October for the next year. By the end of December, we already achieved the budget for the next year. This was the growth of the company, of the user base. So, and then once on mobile, we see new disruptions, but we are now, mobile is a platform which is there to stay. But within mobile, you see new trends. For example, now you see that there is Messenger as a trend. And if I take a different company as an example, Facebook has managed extremely well to move from an application or from being a community to extending the community outside with Facebook Connect on the web. Then they were disrupted by mobile. They brought their business to mobile extremely well. Now on mobile, they see also the trend within mobile to Messenger or messaging. They acquired WhatsApp, and they built on top of WhatsApp Facebook Messenger, and now they have 2 billion players, 2 billion users playing that. So those are trends. There's one thing which is the constant among all this change, and it's basically change. So be ready, whatever happens, that there will continue to be change. It's very tough to make a plan over beyond 3 years, and so you need to build a culture in the company of basically failing and going after change. So sorry for speaking so long.
Brian is looking at me, but I'd like to give it 2 or 3 more minutes. Massimo, you come from more traditional business like banking, which actually probably is one of the business which has been the most challenged by technology. What is your take in terms of how do you see it changing, how do you adapt it to change?
In our industry, technology really affected the way to execute strategy and the business itself, in the sense that as accelerated trends, as accelerated change in the dynamics in the market, as accelerated the speed of executions, and so de facto has increased dramatically the productivity of any person. Think about Tomaso, you know, the trading floor when we started 20 years ago, 25 years ago, were full of people. Now, in the equity market, for example, most of the trading is executed electronically. At least 50% of the market is executed that way, which means that less people, more productivity, but also more volatility and more uncertainty. So rather than disruption, the way you described, for us was very much an impact on productivity and how to address this issue with clients and also with confidentiality and security.
Building on this theme of change, let's now talk about what is the impact of change on those guys that are going to look for university opportunities and then later on job opportunities, but also on parents, which must be listening to us and also think of change. In other words, maybe it's not only being a lawyer or a banker or a notary or a doctor, which is the right thing to do for our children, but maybe something else. So Rahmyn, from your perspective, tell us, how do you see this world creating opportunities, new jobs, or jobs will disappear, when and how?
I think what I see within the industry at the moment is that the change of the industry is allowing for a tremendous amount of new opportunities. I think that you want me to take the microphone? I think that the evolution that we're seeing at the moment will always build on very strong foundations. So I don't necessarily think that, you know, everything is for the sake of the new. So we replicate a lot on the functions that we know in the traditional business that have now new sales channels. So digital for me is a new way of interacting and building consumer channels, but it's not necessarily just a new way of building businesses. Certainly when you look at the traditional world. So my background has largely been in the media entertainment space, and what I see is it's probably one of the most disrupted industries there has been. When you look at that and you take that industry and you fast forward of what is happening at the moment, whether it is in retail, whether it is in consumer goods products, etc., the skill set that you require and what you see is adaptive, but it is always based on founded sources that we have seen in other business today.
Riccardo, you are in a sector which is a heavy user of quants. You know, once I was looking at your website, and there's a lot of requests for people with high quant skills. Are we talking about basically that you have to be a super math expert to be successful in this future world, or this, you know, tech digital revolution will also be applicable to people that maybe read history or something else?
So I think at the core of innovation is understanding really the user, and that's not quant. I think with quant you can optimize, you can improve. We have about 100 people in King who are statisticians, analytical guys, and mathematicians who basically are called business intelligence. We're about 2,200, just to give you an idea. So it's a pretty large number of people. And what they do is basically optimize the product, understanding where, for example, the user falls out, when is a game not fun, or what levels are not fun. We use it for marketing, understanding each user, basically how much is a user worth, how much can we afford to pay with marketing, etc., each channel in each country for each game. But what we cannot do with quant is to invent a game, is to create a game which is great, something which is innovative. That comes from knowledge on one side, so you have to, the more games you've created in the past, the more experience you have, of course. But it comes also from really understanding really well the user and creativity. And also it comes from failing. So the more you fail, the more things you'll learn that actually do not work, and then you get closer to what actually does work.
It's very, very interesting what you're saying, because the image that I have in my mind, the impact of digitalization on the skill that the new kids needs to have in order to to join an employer like us. The fact, in my opinion, they didn't change a lot, but the image that I have in my mind is that when I started, the door to get in this world was very limited, was very, very small. Now, I would say digitalization and globalization made this door wide open, and to give you a number, every year, more or less 65,000 applicants, kids, made an application at Goldman Sachs. And which is a number that is a multiple bigger than the people that they used to have access to Goldman Sachs at my age.
You basically say we would never make it today, you and I.
Yeah, no.
Which is true, by the way.
Yeah, no, probably yes, but no, we have a meeting for sure. Maybe we don't know whether we get hired. That is a different story. But but when I look at the numbers and the breakdown of the heritage, at the end of the day, we have 1 out of 2 that comes from economics, which makes sense because we are a bank at the end of the day. 1 out of 3 comes from engineer, math, science, and technology, but almost 1 out of 5, that was the best number. Okay, 1 out of 5 comes from arts. In other words, what we appreciate a lot is the creativity, motivation, curiosity a lot, and we pick talent from any source, including art, including math, including quants, including history, philosophy, you name it.
Paul, if we move on to the next question, what are the skills that you found helped you the most during this evolutionary periods? What transferable skills? And I would attach a second question, which is, what is the best career advice you ever received? How did you apply it?
Okay, I'd like to answer the second question first. So the best career advice I ever got was from my father, who said, always do what you love and don't do what you don't like doing. Be passionate about something, be inquisitive, understand it, because when you understand something, a job and a career actually becomes a life. And I think I've been incredibly lucky in that I've been able to explore something that I'm deeply passionate about, which is this whole digital realm. And I think the best advice I ever got was from my father, but he also gave me another caveat, which I should probably share with you, which was he did make me train to be a lawyer before he let me be an entrepreneur. So he wanted me to fall back, and albeit I'm a failed lawyer, but I've been a relatively successful entrepreneur, but I did have something that gave me a grounding, and I do feel a little bit of a fraud because I should be here table banging, telling you all you can abandon plans for university and let's go and build the next great app. But I'd be doing you all a disservice because I would be a hypocrite I was at my 14-year-old daughter's parents' evening yesterday encouraging her teachers to make her work harder so that she could have something to fall back on. So I think I completely agree with your comment. That idea of a broad base of talent, a broad base of skills and a broad base of knowledge is fundamental to any company. And I think your point's absolutely right. The most intriguing user experiences, the most engaging games, the best apps are created by people who are endemically and fundamentally creative, engaged individuals, and they're supported by the quants, the mechanics scientists, the engineers, the economic specialists. The other thing I'd say is that careers are fluid in the digital industry. So in the last 2 years, I've been head of product, head of design, and a CEO. And those 3 careers are fundamentally different jobs, different business functions, so one has to be flexible, I think, in today's society.
Rahmyn, you oversee at the senior levels a company with hundreds of thousands of people. How do you see people progressing? How do you see the key success sectors that enable people to achieve their goals and at the same time bringing value to the firm?
I think I would definitely echo what the people have said here, which is curiosity and open-mindedness. In our firm, for example, one of the areas that we do on a regular basis is to rotate people every 3 years into a new job. And essentially, the idea is to take you out of your comfort zone, put you back into a different role, have transferable skills, and move on through the organization like that. That is incredibly successful, and obviously in the area of consulting, working with different clients on a continuous basis, different projects, gives you a massive exposure of seeing different things. It was very surprising for me, having come out of a different industry, joining consulting, where it's exactly on the flip side, where if you do something well, just keep on doing it and do it well for very long. And all of a sudden you're finding yourself in this new paradigm.
I'll just play for a second the panelist. And I'd say
This is not about choosing between studying further or developing an app or going on to setting up your business. It's actually exactly the contrary. It's study more because you just don't know what's going to be like tomorrow. And the more you know, in a variety of fields, in fact, the more background you have, whether it's math or geography, languages, the more you're going to be better placed to exploit you're going to see going forward. I wanted to be a financial analyst. I became a banker. Then I told you I became a manufacturer of boots in Mongolia. Then I ended up setting up a radiopharmaceutical company and an outsourcing company. And now I'm thinking of something else. So honestly speaking, I wasn't planning any of this. In part it's luck. In part it's just chance. In part is, but the key is be prepared for the unknown. And then separately, when it comes, be as quickly as you can in adapting and in fact exploiting it. All right, now the next question to the panel is, here comes a student and he has a good idea, a business idea. Riccardo, what would you suggest him to do?
First of all, is never listen to suggestions. So let me tell you a bit what is required, from my point of view at least, to be successful with an idea. First of all, you need to know that the idea is a good idea, and you can look around and you can see if the idea was already done somewhere before. Usually there are good news and bad news if you know it's been done somewhere before, and the good news, or the bad news is it has been done somewhere before, so it's not new. The good news is hopefully that the idea works, so you have a proof of concept somewhere else. If the idea has already been done where you want to launch the idea, then it's actually bad news. Don't do it, because it's tougher to launch a product which has already been launched. If it's new, it's much easier. The cost of marketing is much lower. So this is the first thing. At the same time, if you find out the idea has not been done, then you should research better, because actually a lot of things have been tried and tested and killed and are not there anymore. And it's equally important to understand why it's not working anymore. But this is the first ingredient, is the idea when you start, because you have all eggs in one basket. The second thing is you need to be experienced. So you need to put together a team of people who actually are experienced, have done it before. In this way, you reduce your risk. And the best way to reduce your risk is to work with people with whom you have worked before. We all worked before, the founders of King. And we are still on board, and the guys are amazing. They all basically continued with the company. So this is why when you have an idea and you're at school, well, better do it if you think it's right. Drop off school, drop off Harvard if you think the idea is great and you have great people, but it's a bigger risk than if you already had some experience in the field. And the third thing is, I had an interview with a lady who interviewed some of the biggest entrepreneurs, and I asked her, so what is actually the red line among all of these entrepreneurs which you have interviewed, much more successful than I have ever been? And she said, look, actually often entrepreneurs are not the smartest, I can confirm. The entrepreneurs, however, have one thing in common: they are resilient. I think you mentioned before resilience. This is definitely key. So it took us 13 years to get us where we are. At some point, Some of our investors, they lost patience. They sold their shares 1 month before we launched on Facebook. They lost $1.4 billion, just to give you an idea what resilience is.
I mean,
on the point of dropping out of school, I slightly disagree. I think don't do it. I think
you did it, no?
I agree with you.
Okay.
Didn't you drop out of school? Oh, no, you kicked out of school. Sorry, that's different.
It was kicked out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The point that I would definitely say is the number of successes are not all of what you see, obviously, of King.com. And I think it is always easy to look at the Facebooks, the Kings, and so on and so forth, and saying, I'm an entrepreneur, off I go and do it. And I think, beyond eating pizza and hang out with your friends and coding stuff, it's a really, really tough world. I'm working very, very much with a lot of the startup community. I see a lot of failures, and of course, failing is good. Getting up and delivering thereafter is better. But all I'm saying is, don't be miffed by the fact that it's an easy ride. There is no such thing as an easy ride, and I think the amount of sweat and blood that you need to put in order to be successful, particularly when you work on your own, the elan that you have to get up and do the work, to build your business plan, to convince people, it is not that easy. And I think the point that you made, absolutely right. You can succeed in a team. You need to have a very, very good team. But I think people shouldn't be blue-eyed about how tough the business is for you to start your own business, and that is for any business. It's we shouldn't also make the distinction only of talking about tech. There's so many different entrepreneurs who have great ideas in other areas, but you have to have something to fall back on.
Just one thing. I think you do not become entrepreneur to make money. Certainly not.
Right.
You become entrepreneur because it's something you need to do. You need to prove to yourself that you want to build your own business at some point.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the gentleman made absolutely the right points there. I think, from my perspective, I couldn't echo more what was just said. If you get into business to make an extraordinary amount of money, the chances are you'll have an extraordinary fate. And I've seen it time and time again. I probably spend 50% of my time with startups, entrepreneurs, pioneers. Ideapreneur seems to be the new trend in London. The stark reality is, I think what you need to do is assemble a virtual board, and this is what I tend to advise people to do. I tend to ask them, who do you admire, who do you trust, who do you know? Who can you trust with your idea? Who can give you that feedback? And many of you here, certainly if you're a pupil at the school, you'll have chums and mates who've probably got opinions that can guide you in your idea. And the same still applies to all of us when we're thinking about how to evolve our businesses. We talk to the people that we trust. We talk to people we've worked with before. We talk to trusted parties. And we use our own virtual board. And ironically, 2 or 3 of the guys I'll pick the phone up to first when I have a crazy idea are the guys I was at school with. So don't be nasty to your chums. Keep them on side. That's probably the best advice I can give you.
I don't have anything, at the end of the day, they are entrepreneurs and they are more credible than myself. But as a financier, I think the most important thing is the resiliency. And because when you see an entrepreneur that they really, really believes on his ideas, you can start thinking that he must write. And basically, the other thing associated with resilience is the time. Don't be scared to make mistakes, sometimes to fail, because you are gifted with one of the most important things at your age, which is the time. Time has a lot of value. When you look at your life as an option, every time you take a decision, you exercise an option. Shall I go right? Shall I go left? Shall I stop? Shall I postpone? This is an exercise of an option. Option has a value because of the time. And you are long of time. So use it, try and try again. As long as you don't want to do shortcut for the money, but because of the passion, because of your idea. And the more these things are clear, the more you attract capital and people that they want to associate with you.
One very last comment. Once one of my sons I won't say whether it's the one who was in LATYMER or the other one. He asked me, so Daddy, how did you convince Mom to marry you? And I said, never take no for an answer. And it's important in business. It's very, whether you're raising money, whether you're trying to conquer new clients, new ideas, new partnerships, just keep banging at it. Of course, it has to be a good idea. And it was a good idea in my case, but never take no for an answer. One more question, and we're going to go to the audience for questions. Okay, I'm a guy, I'm not really expert in math, I'm not the tech guy, but I understand that technology is going to be important more and more in evolving the future, in shaping the businesses, in changing the landscape. How do I exploit this? I mean, what do I need to study? Again, I'm a failure in math. So what can I do to be ahead of the competition in being able to exploit the opportunities and convince employers I'll be able to help them in exploiting opportunities, even if I'm just not a tech guy?
Me? Okay. Well, I'm the best example that I don't know anything. I don't know how to code. I'm not a mathematician, not a statistician. I studied economics. And the reason why I studied economics is because I had no clue what else to do. Sorry. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I had no idea what to do. I had no skills. And so I said, okay, what gives me still leaves all options open? It was basic economics. After having studied economics, I came out and said, okay, now I can read a newspaper. What should I do next? And so I thought, again, something which leaves all options open. That's why I went into consulting. So it took me some time. So for me, the solution was to find someone else who actually was very good at those things, who knows how to code, who knows how to create a product, etc. And then to bring them together with an idea. I think my recommendation to you guys, number one, if you are the best, you always have more options than if you are less good. So I think, coming back to the first point, I think to study hard, to get good scores gives you more options, and at the end of the day, options give you more opportunities. The second one is, if you want to get closer to, coming back to your question, to tech, learn. I think nowadays, like I did before, it was to know English or to know Chinese. Nowadays, I think it's to know to code. So if you can, try to learn to code, because nowadays coding is much easier. You can do yourself. If you have an idea, you can implement it yourself. And once it's on a mobile device, the world can see it tomorrow.
Perhaps you want to say just what coding means for people like me?
Coding and writing lines, so that you can create an app, and the app can be put on the store. There's lots of software out there.
So I'll pick up on the coding point. I think coding is another language, and I think languages is key. I think just as much as language, culture, coding, you might not want to become a coder for the rest of your life. You might not want to do coding for the sake of building your own business. But what it does, it gives you an ability to dissect and deal with problem areas in a very logical manner. And I think if you learn that as a skill set, it does something else. It allows you to look at problems and problem solving. And I think, if I had the opportunity back, I would code. I'm incredibly frustrated because I like things to be done very quickly, and because I can't do it, I have to rely on other people. But if I could do it, I would be blessed. And I think the additional attributes, particularly when we're talking about, what differentiates you. I see so many people that come to our firm. They're all good. They all speak languages. They do so many different things. I think what a lot of people forget is to be themselves, to be human, to have interaction with people. And I think as we're living more and more in a digital world, I'm very adamant about the point that my kids don't have constantly a device in front of their face, that they learn things that they, like myself, go around with a bicycle when it's cold. They have dreams. They become imaginative. And I think, there are elements that are very, very important. When all of these people come, and I don't know if it is the same in your industries, but they turn up at the door and you look at the CV, and those that make it through are all more or less equally good. And you have a conversation with them and you say, what are your hobbies? And they're almost not prepared for the question. When you say, what do you do on holidays? No answer to the question. And I think there is an increasing lack of personality. And I think, the skills of tomorrow, I think in a differentiating world, is the interaction with people. How do you communicate? How do you look at someone? How do you shake someone's hand? And people are forgetting that, and I find that is incredibly important. So my advice, whilst study, learn, absolutely yes, but don't forget those elements. Travel, learn cultures. The cultural differences are so important to understand, particularly in business. And those are all attributes that you can take with you in school if you're open-minded, keep your eyes and ears open, and literally walk through the world in that manner. And I find that incredibly important.
Okay, one more on this question, if you have specific points to make.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a point to any pupils out here. The piece of advice I give you is what goes on Facebook stays on Facebook. Your future employers will see it, and they will likely filter you out. So that's, if I have to give you one piece of advice, it's be sensible and be nice online. I guess the only other piece I'd say is that with all of the educational resources that exist online, immerse yourself in those. Use them. I mean, Oxford University just announced they're about to open an open online course over the coming few months, which is just a phenomenal resource that didn't exist a few years ago, and it enables you to pivot your education on your own. So completely agree with these guys. Over to you.
Okay.
I'll actually ask the first question from the audience. It comes from Zoe. She's a parent, I believe. And she's asking, what is the gig economy impact on gig economy, meaning temporary jobs, flexible jobs? How is it going to change opportunities for the upcoming youngsters in the job market?
I'm going to try an idea that I have. I have sort of a view that I think the workplace as such is changing. And I think, as I'm deliberating about this with myself at the moment, I'll try it with the audience. I think that in the future, the workplace as such will fall away for various organizations. You will have the workbench that produces, makes, etc., pp. And then on the other side, you will have projects. And I think for projects, you will need different types of people at different times or different times that will address things that drive an organization forward. And as a result of that, I think we will see changes in the way that we work. We will have much more flexibility in the way that we interact, and I think that there will be a change that organizations will work going forward. So as such, I don't believe that in years to come you will have a job in a company if you are in the management fields, etc. But you will actually work with teams on projects, a little bit like the film industry has been doing that with casting. And you work on a sequel, tomorrow on another one, and I think it'll be very interesting because it goes to the point of working with teams in a quite flexible environment where there is no day-to-day workplace to go to.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't think people have a job for life anymore. Now, that's either a good thing or a bad thing for some of you guys who are just studying here now, but I think people will have multiple careers during their working lives, and so the erstwhile advice I'd give you is try and get the basic foundations in place, but also we haven't spoken about a lot of the extracurricular stuff that you guys get exposed to here, which is fundamental for you as you work in this new and evolving economy. As Rahmyn said, how important is sport to you, or drama, or music? Those are fundamental engagements. Those are things that broaden your horizons, introduce you to different themes, different ideas, different people. And those are the things that employers most want to see. They want to see a broad brush of skills, not just brilliant at maths, but maybe great at hockey, good at netball, great swimmer, brilliant chorister. Those are fundamental things that we look for that differentiate key candidates.
Definitely, I totally agree with him. In my opinion, be yourself. And what we really, truly appreciate the most is to see a candidate that is himself and that he can do different things. And again, I go back to the determination, the curiosity, and the passion. Because when you have passion, curiosity, and determination, basically, even though you don't know how to handle a situation because you never face it, you try to figure it out. You are ready and prepared to have setbacks, and you know how to get up again and try it again. So that's what we like to have. And because you come from a very good school, you have privilege, you are smart, highly educated. So at the end of the day, to differentiate yourself is to be yourself and try to pursue your objectives and your dreams with a lot of passion. That's, I would say, the most important thing. And in a nutshell.
Thank you, panel. I'd like now to open up to the floor. I can see a lot of people already raising their hands for questions. I think we have gained about 10 minutes from the initial timetable, so I think we have about half an hour of time. Let's really make it a two-way conversation. Please. Okay, I can see a couple in the very back. They told me to say that person with a red skirt, but actually can't see much more than the hand. So you'll have to pick up.
Hi there. Two questions, and I just tweeted them. How is generation Y and Z changing the workplace? And these are the Zs coming out now. And also, how are we encouraging women in technology?
Avid is not here. So,
This is so tempting. No, I'm not. I'm a huge fan of equality in the workplace. Working with a startup at the moment, which I'm very lucky to work with, lead coder, so the person who's head of building the product that we have envisaged, is a young lady who read PP at Cambridge, turns out to be a very good tennis player, but is also an absolute genius when it comes to cutting code. So to answer your question very directly, I don't think that there is any greater amount of discrimination or less discrimination. I can speak with great honesty here, being the father of 4 girls, than perhaps there was 10 or 15 years ago in a non-digital community. I think there is still, and it does frustrate me, some misogyny that creeps in to the commercial environment. It doesn't make me very proud to say so, but certainly I think there are those individuals now who are pioneering and trying to realize that actually the male testosterone-fueled environments of the past aren't actually the most productive, creative, and philosophically right environments to create great companies, great products, and to win great customer experiences. So to answer your question about the sort of categorization and demography of the generations as they come through, the stark reality is, and I guess I have a problem with that segregation, I don't think there's be any great difference. I think what will change will be the social impact of technology on the children that are evolving from school, going through university, and their acceptance of that by osmosis. It's not stuff they have to learn, it's stuff I learn as a digital expert from my kids. And I think it's important that we realize as parents, perhaps, that our children are a jolly sight more about the technology that they're engaged with than we ever will. And so I think it's important to ring-fence that and recognize that when you talk to your kids.
If I address first the second question, I think that we think that there is a huge opportunity in terms of brains in having more diversity in tech. I think if you look at tech, still a small amount of the overall employee workforce is actually women, and I think there's a huge opportunity there. Now, there are 2 reasons for that. I think the first reason is the interest, I think, for the industry. It was less cool probably than, we have different departments. If you go in our legal department, 9 out of 10 are actually women. In marketing, many more. In coding, considerably fewer. So what we're doing there is we are raising the awareness. We are trying to say actually working in coding and in tech is actually quite cool. Join us, and we do this also in schools. What we do, we are also supporting and we're co-founders of a coding academy so younger age, especially focused on women, and in general diversity, so it's not just women. And secondly, the second reason is that once we need to create also an environment which allows also women not just to start, but also to be able to continue also when there is, for example, motherhood. So we are working there on parental policies where there is a parental leave, not just as a woman, but also as a father, so that you can actually take parental leave as a father to actually support the family, and then the woman can continue her job. That's only an example, and there are many, many more. But there's a lot to do still.
Floor. There's a lady here on the left, in front.
Hi, I was wondering, as a student, I think a lot of us know who are students, in our future careers, developing technology will very much be a part of our future career. And I was just wondering, what do you think are the general impacts that developing technology, primarily robotic technology, have an effect on our careers, I mean, as a whole?
Rahmyn.
I think the area of robotics will be quite significant, but I think, again, it will be in the first instance for the mundane part of repetitive jobs. I think there's a large hysteria at the moment where people are thinking, the world is going to be taken over by robots. There are certain things that they can do and they can perfect, but they need to be trained, monitored, supervised, schooled by humans. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know where this is going to end up in 10, 15, 20 years. But it's just as much as with artificial intelligence. You can have bots running huge amount of processes that can do things, but you need to know the question to ask. And I think if you look at that and you make technology work for you and you take that as a principle, then I think you can build your own mental picture around that as to where you see the future to go and where you want to be in that environment.
Massimo, before you talk about technology in the financial services industry as an event which over time reduces the need for people in certain areas, like for example trading floor, but how does it become an opportunity, in fact, technology? How do we, as students, how can we prepare for the change and find new opportunities in the financial services sector?
The first most important thing, in my opinion, is that, let's call it technology business is becoming a massive opportunity to invest money for the financial institutions in the world. If you think about it, I grew up with IPO, when you list a company. We used to list banks. Then we evolved ourselves and we list Prada. I'm sure you know the brand. Now we list Facebook. We list Snapchat, and so on and so forth. You name it. Where we invest money in, and then we take the company into the marketplace. So it's becoming a business itself that in US is massive. So it's becoming a new industry with a lot of opportunity. And trust me, when you need to spot opportunity in this field, a 30 years old person is much better than a 52. So for you guys, there is like an highway, okay? Point number one. Point number two, at the end of the day, technology, even in traditional business, is creating massive opportunity. As I told you, Goldman 20 years ago probably would have attracted, 1,000 people in terms of new applicants every year. Now it's 65,000. And we hire probably between 3,000, 3,500 per year, which looks a very small number, but is 10%, actually 8% of the total population. In other words, 1 person out of 10, changes every year, in an institution highly global and digital like Goldman Sachs. So in other words, the technology has created a huge number of opportunities. So in other words, creates more productivity, wide open doors to people that they want to be part of the system, and also tons of opportunity for investment, which creates additional opportunity as a chain effect.
I would like to add a geographic spin to the question, and moving on to Paul. Paul always gets tough questions. Riccardo is dreaming of building a tech city on the east of London. Rahmyn spends a lot of his time in Berlin. Are we saying that our children will have to find opportunities if they're going really successful in tech, going to California, Berlin, or China, or is it old Europe still a place to be for tech, or in fact we're really lagging behind?
That's a good question. So I can use the experience of my career. I spent 4 years working on the West Coast in the US. I spent 2 years living in Paris. I spent 2 years living in Singapore. And that was driven by people knowing what I had done in Europe and then pulling me out to those different spaces. And I know Rahmyn's very familiar with that particular corporate dynamic. I think the world is global now, and I think we all have to recognize that sometimes the skill set that you need may not be where you best want it, so you have to go and acquire it. And I think certainly I would encourage everybody here, certainly among the student faculty, to focus on the idea that you need not necessarily be in London, although I am fervently proud that we've got a fantastic tech hub here in London. We've got some amazing companies here in London that are pioneering global technology and really bringing some extraordinary products to market. So we should be very proud. The same is true as in Berlin. And I think we're now seeing these hubs in New York, in Tel Aviv, and a whole bunch of other places. So it's a fascinating space, great place to play, but be global, think global as well.
Be global is very important. At the end of the day, the idea can be generated in any part of the world. That's the beauty of the digitalization. At the end of the day, you can be in Afghanistan, in Italy, or at Palo Alto, that at the end of the day, you have exposure to the world at the same way. The condition to translate this idea into a business idea and then in an enterprise, okay, are different across jurisdiction. And of course, that goes along with the bureaucracy, fiscal system. There is nothing related to the where you are when you have this idea, when you expose yourself to other people like you. So in other words, you can have a fantastic idea whether you're in London, Milan, or Berlin. Then it's a different story when you want to have a business located in the US, Holland, or Northern Africa, because then you need to have other issues to address, like infrastructure, legal system, protection for your rights, and so on and so forth. But the idea, that's the beauty of digitalization.
Thank you. I have sort of 2 points to make. One was in response to, I think, the first question about what Generation X and Y are doing to embrace, I guess, not just diversity, but the millennials and post-millennials. And what I can say, I'm not at the forefront of tech creativity, but I run a creative company across 26 countries. And we are very, very keen to embrace reverse mentoring, because what you guys, everybody who's 18 and younger here, know is what we don't know, and at least we know what we don't know, if that makes sense. So it is your future, and it's very, for an older person to hear that anybody under 40 is not so interesting, you've got to deal with that. So, and then the second thing, which was I think the very first comment that was made, which was about embracing failure. Then again, my first failure was when I was 40, and the only regret I have is that I wish it had been earlier. And I would put it to the panel, how can we help our children? Because schools like LATYMER aren't the place where we are very good as parents in allowing them to embrace failure. So how can we help people to have the courage to fail?
When it comes to failure, the microphone is being passed to me. I don't know what that means. I think I like the point that you made a lot, and I think it largely stands with us as parents to to help our children from a very early age. I think it's partially cultural, and I can just say, you know, this is, from what I see at the moment, you know, between the US, the UK, or Germany, where I'm spending at the moment a lot of time, the word failure doesn't resonate so well. So in America it's celebrated. Here I think we're somewhere in between, and in Germany it's a no, 9, and it represents a little bit also what you see in terms of the marketplace and you know, successful startups turning out. Here's a thought. If I was to say LATYMER is an accelerator, yeah, so to use some of the startup methodology, and all the parents would put themselves up as becoming mentors. And you look at yourself and you say, you know, how many lawyers are in the room, how many, I met 2 at least of my partners from Accenture here, how many consultants, how many creative agencies, and so on and so forth. And I think amongst, you know, only the people in the room, you would make a bunch of fantastic mentors being able to give guidance. So instead of, you know, just bringing people in or, you know, getting the kids to apply for internships, you know, in a community like yourselves, why don't you help each other? And I think, you know, the guidance that you can give the children, the opportunities for kids at a very young age, it doesn't always need to be, you know, the first internship, but the ability to say, I am thinking of becoming, I would like to have a chat. And I think those would be beginning ideas and seeds as to how you could evolve, rotate to the new, and make a difference. And I would encourage you to do that, and I hope that I addressed your question a little bit there.
I can only speak from personal experience of being a dad, and I think it's a huge challenge. How we educate our children perhaps sometimes requires us to have some candor and to explain that everything isn't rosy and wonderful and swimming and fabulous. That's probably the hardest part of being a parent. It's also probably one of the toughest things the kids can hear, which is that actually parents aren't perfect, although once they get to their teenage years, they're very aware of that anyway. I think the thing that I would encourage, I suppose, is that concept of failure can be managed out by doing things outside achieving grades or achieving certain performance. So things like sport, things like music, things like drama encourage things to go well, but they also encourage people to recognize when things don't go so well in a less pressurized or a different set of circumstances. And that broader range of skills breeds, I think, the ability to pick oneself up, dust oneself off, and get on with things. And so I think that's why this is, as Rahmyn rightly said, a fantastic environment for people to be supportive of one another. And also, you know, I think we underestimate the resilience of our kids and their ability to talk to one another too. So I think just being candid is probably the most important thing we as parents can do.
I can speak about failure. I had spent many years in the banking industry. I was managing a lot of people and interviewed hundreds of people, maybe thousands. And I just felt I had an incredible ability to understand people, to judge people. Judge meaning having a sense on who was the person in front of me. And here we are, when I was in Mongolia, building a business, which I thought was a great business, beautiful country, by the way. I ended up partnering up with another Italian, introduced to me by an ambassador, that turned out to be an absolute, completely dishonest person. Fake accounts, fake numbers. And, you know, I really learned that, you know, the world is not just what we're used to. LATYMER is not necessarily a perfect sample of what you're going to find in the real world. And so be prepared for the change and for the worst. And build your personal partnerships with people, even within LATYMER. I just couldn't agree more on the concept of building a community here. Build a partnership with people that maybe some have different skills than you do, and comes 5 years from now, 15 years from now, you're going to be able to go to them and say, hey, what do you think about this? You know, would you like to come with me for 4 days in Mongolia and tell me what you think about this opportunity? And this is something very important, which in the current world, digital world, there is some risk, I have to say, forgive me guys, for superficiality. Because we put a like or a dislike, but you know, we often think that having 500 friends is great, but let's start having 15 partners, whether they are parents, elder brothers, younger brothers, friends, schoolmates, that are going to help us out in forging our ideas and testing them before we go too far.
I think what my father told me a long time ago was never take yourself too serious. And I think when I came out of university with good scores, and then I went into my first job in consulting, I thought I was the smartest person on earth. And now, having, you know, many years later, I learned that I'm not. And actually, this is really important to understand your limits, but also to be humble and not to think that you are better than others, because it empowers you, allows you to listen to others. And I think as important as failure is, it's actually important also to listen and get different views, and also to be less judgmental, which I think is a key learning which I'm still trying to improve on.
Next question. Somebody on the right side.
Hello. Do you think that social media will continue to become even more prevalent in our modern day lives? And if so, how do you think it will affect business? Thank you.
Who wants to start?
Right, so let me just phrase that question again. So will it continue to grow, i.e. social media, and how will it impact business? Social media has evolved over the last 15 years, probably actually over the last 30, because before Facebook and Bebo and Friends Reunited, there were community systems and then bulletin board systems and then closed network groups. So what you have to remember is that the social media that you're engaging with today is merely a product of the evolution of technology and how it's rendered to you. Social networking's been around since the birth of the computer and the personal computing platform. So that's point one. So yes, it's here and it's here to stay. Point two, how will it impact business? I think it's safe to say that with a market cap of 200 billion, Facebook's already fairly prevalent in impacting business, not only in the financial perspective, but if you look at advertising spend on Facebook now, if you look at conversion flip to virtual currencies, if you look at the promotional work that's going on in gaming, and a whole raft of promotional activities and aggregation plays that these social platforms are making, where Facebook acquires its logical successor in Instagram, binds that in, and suddenly we have a superpower social media platform, then we have to respect, I think, and realize that Facebook is, to all intents and purposes, a social operating system. It's not a network anymore. It's an ecosystem that people plug in and out of. And that can be a product, it could be a consumer, it can be a brand, it could be content, and ultimately, I think it will be commerce.
But when they say that maybe half of the increase in the global market value of advertising is going to go to Facebook, are we facing some sort of I don't say antitrust issues, but is the world going to become a bit boring because, you know, everybody does the same? Who wants to answer this stupid question? Rahmyn.
Is the world going to become boring? No, I don't think so. I think you know, I like what you said, Paul, because the point is these things have existed before. These are new communication channels. I think, yes, people will eventually get bored to show their cats in a basket on Facebook, most probably, but there will be other things that are going to evolve from that. Are these social networks growingly having all the advertising spend? I do believe. I think it's a new way of communicating. I think people are clearly turning away from TV, etc. It's a timing issue. It's going to evolve. I don't think that Facebook will retain the monopoly. I think other things will evolve and people will move on and digress. What you can't neglect is, for all of these services, they have an incredible strength based on the data that they're gathering. And as a result of that, they have intelligence. And as we said before, they need to think what are the right questions to ask and then deal with. And I can tell you that a lot of these social media networks that I am in touch with They do have an enormous lot of data, but they're trying to figure out themselves how can they actually use it, because their biggest customers is not, I want to be careful how I phrase this, it is the community that is using the network on one hand, but they are the ones who are generating the traffic, so it's almost like the fuel. But the large organizations that sit behind it, that are trying to generate the likes, they're the ones who are effectively creating the ability for influencers on those networks to become the strong partners. So moving forward, I think there will be changes. And the question as to who holds the key to that, I don't have an answer for it yet, but I'm looking at it with a lot of interest.
If I can add one more thing, I think that I'm super excited about the future, because data can be seen as a threat, privacy, etc. But actually, if you see it from a point of view of a consumer, the opportunities are immense. So, I mean, if you saw, for example, now Uber invested in a new product, which is about travel, and I think it's called Trip.com. So basically, imagine you're having a trip, it's raining, you're in a city you don't know. It comes up with ideas of what you can do because the weather is not as good as you thought, based on your interests. So I'm sporty, I know it's raining, so I cannot go jogging outside, it's not ideal, it gives me other opportunities. So I believe a lot in artificial intelligence, and the base, the wood for the fire is actually data. And so I think it's a give and take. I think the consumer will be more willing to give data if they see that there is something coming out of that. And I think I 100% support. For me, we grew on the back of giants. Our giants were Facebook, Google, and Apple. Google with Android, and I think that you can see them as platforms for building your business. And the opportunities are immense. And a team of 10, Candy Crush was developed by 10 people. So you don't need 2,000 people to come up with great ideas.
One additional point, and I'll pass it through. I mean, the one other thing about the optimism, I think also, let's look at this very optimistic. Things like data that we just talked about, what do they do for our safety? When you look the abilities that we have today with advanced analytics to spot terrorist threats, to do picture analysis, to reduce crime, this is not science fiction anymore. It's happening every single day. And I think, when you look at that, the threat versus the value, there's a lot to be said in terms of the areas that we're digressing and moving into at the moment.
No, I wanted to only to be controversial. From a social standpoint, though, to me the technology and the digitalization has created an enormous, I'm positive too, optimistic, don't get me wrong, but has created a massive shift of value and wealth from one part of the world to the other. Not geographically, but in terms of if Facebook worth 200 billion euro, is because through that platform has captured most of the value of the value chain, or Amazon. But Amazon means also that the product has to be delivered door to door, physically, okay? So in my opinion, we need to rebalance out the value creation with all the people that are around this platform. Because, for example, all the strikes associated with the presence of Uber is because Uber has created a platform whereby the service of taxi, cars, and so on and so forth costs less and less and less, but has created pressure on a number of people that now under severe pressure on their own salary. At the end of the day, we should think about it whether we can, how can I say, rebalance out all the value creation in this proposition also with the end users and the other people. Because otherwise, they are no long-term sustainable.
This panel will last other 3 hours, I think. This panel will last other 3 hours. No, I think that, I think technology, I think that I always start from the user. So from a user need. And then you can decide to stop technology because you want to keep the existing world, or to embrace technology and then, see because the reason why Facebook is where it is because there is a need behind, which is user-based. And then, of course, they've managed to build a business. So my belief is, I think that the reason I'm saying that, sorry, I'm very passionate about it, is because in Europe, there is a tendency, and not just here among this panel, but also among lawmakers. We are very active in Europe, in Brussels. There's a tendency to protect established industries, established workplaces. And by doing so, we are harming Europe, because in the US, they are not protecting the industry, so they can be faster, they can fail, they can improve, they can come up with ideas and services which are best for the user. At the end, they will also win here in Europe, because they have a product which is better.
I was going to say something, but no, I think particularly to Uber, Uber is using the technology in order to aid a service for which there is a big need. So I think, you know, when you look at these services, first of all, and I totally agree, it is from the consumer perspective, so it is the behavioral economics that drive the businesses. And then I think it is the platform that makes it possible. And to the point that Riccardo just made, in Germany, Uber did launch, it was shut down, and as a result of that, you still have the very angry taxi drivers that drive you in a smelly car, because there's no alternative. So give the choice and the alternative, and the end consumer chooses which service he wants to use.
Sorry if again, I'm very passionate about this topic, but I think that for me, the other example is actually the UK. Now, you can use Halo, and Halo is not just using, you know, the Uber non-licensed, it's using actually cabs, and it works really well. So actually, I went from taxi to Uber and now back to Halo. Shh, don't say that, please.
This is an example of rebalancing the impact of the technology or new idea to make it work long term. At the end of the day, Halo is a good example. It's a good, you know, adjustment in the idea to make it work long term. That's what you know. Someone asked the impact, and that, in my opinion, is a very good example.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. I'd like to reach out to the inner dreams or fears of students. So I want a student now. What really is in your mind? What do you want to know from this distinguished panel that you just can't think of anything else during the day when you think of your future, your career, and your future studies?
I feel like, will there be more competition as we grow up? Because I think I used to want to be a sports person before this debate, but then I found maybe that's just something to drop back on, and maybe in an interview for a job, maybe you can say that. But will there be more competition for better jobs in the future, or will there be less?
Riccardo.
Yes. there is always competition. I think that, you know, yeah, I think that's why I think, you know, but you have to do what you like to do. And sometimes, like me, when you don't know what you like to do or you don't have an idea, it's actually equally important to know what you don't like to do. And then you should just stop doing it and move on to the next thing.
I totally agree. I think, you know, try as many things as you can whilst you're young. And eventually find the place that you like, excel in it, become an expert in it. You know, if your job is your hobby, you'll be great. And I think that to the point of you know, success, I think the biggest question is it is what you make out of it. It's, you know, success is measured as a result of when you go to bed and you say, I had a good day and I made a difference. It is not, you know, necessarily the amount of money you have. So I think you need to really think about for yourself as to what defines you. And I think that's really important. And the last, I'll pass on, I think, Massimo, you made a fantastic point about the time and the time you have. I think my biggest mistake as a student was I looked at school almost like a project. It was, oh my God, the exam is finished, I can move on to the next. Enjoy the time of whilst you learn. Enjoy the moment, because it is such a fantastic, fruitful experience. the good or bad news, it doesn't stop. And, you know, maybe one thing when we think about the digital world, we have seen so many things and we have seen yet nothing. And, you know, you learn on a daily basis and you need to put yourself into a new concept. So the only thing that you can do, I think, to be successful and drive that change in competition is equip yourself with the tools. And that is your mindset, your intuition, your belief that will drive you into the direction for you to excel in whatever you want to do.
Can I just ask, what sport did you want to play?
Cricket and football, but either one.
Excellent choice. I myself am a rugby fanatic, so let me just tell you something about rugby. So I was lucky enough to play professionally. It's half, I think, of what defined me as a successful entrepreneur, because I learned all of the qualities of competition, of analysis, of collaboration, communication, respect, understanding why you lose and how you fix it next time. So don't give up on that dream. That's what's going to differentiate you and make you capable of competing in what will be an ever-competitive market. So don't drop that aspiration. Keep those things burning. They're just as important as everything else you do in life. And they'll teach you, believe me, those two sports will teach you a darn sight more than many of the things that you study in a textbook. So you've got to find that happy balance, but don't ever lose your vision and your dreams.
Totally agree. Totally agree. Sports is a fantastic proxy of life because it's a respect of competition, respect of the opponents, trust your partners if you do a team sport. If you are in a sport where you compete by yourself, it means that you need to beat yourself because at the end of the day, the real challenge is against you. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is that every match, every fight, every race, you try to improve, which is much more important than to be number one.
Thank you all. I hope that this session has helped you shed some light on how your future is going to be like. Certainly how you're going to look like in 30 years. The key takeaway I would really like to mention is it's not really important what you know, but it's really most important is to be prepared to learn from the change, whether it's failure, innovation, new trends. Be prepared, so be aware of what's going on around you. Try to some extent foresee change, but certainly to have that mental, even geographical flexibility to be able to exploit what might happen next in your life, not only business life. I would also like to go back to the point Rahmyn made on building a partnership within the school, whether it's just giving each other ideas or parents help each other in coming up with ideas, not necessarily, summer jobs, even then, but in general, let's share information, knowledge. Somebody is more expert in high-tech or in science or in art, whatever that is. Let's try to use the wealth of know-how that this audience and the rest of the parents and students have to create opportunities amongst all of you. Thank you all for being so patient and listening to us.